Good morning, Tom. This is Gail Cutler speaking to you from Chicago, Illinois. And could you please tell us where you are?
Yes, Gail, I live downstate Illinois, really, in a town called Shiloh, which is basically across the river from St. Louis, Missouri.
So we're on the same time zone, and I think we share the same weather pattern.
Yes.
And we share something else, Tom, that we wish we did not. We share the loss of our children, and we share the desire and the urge to help as many others as we can to avoid what our families have gone through, and to also help those in desperate need of exactly what your book is about, called A Balanced Life, 9 Strategies for Coping with the Mental Health Problems of a Loved One. Tom, would you please tell our audience what it is that prompted you and your family to write this very important book?
Thank you, Gail. Yes, I will. Actually, there was a previous book a couple years ago, 2005, called The Tattered Tapestry, and that was the subtitle, The Family's Search for Peace with Bipolar Disorder. As that book indicates, our daughter, Carla, who was a twin with her twin brother, Kevin, developed bipolar disorder when she was a sophomore in college, second semester, sophomore year, went into a very deep depression. And after a couple of years and a couple of bouts of depression and then a very serious manic phase of her illness, she was, I think, properly diagnosed as bipolar at that point. During the 7 years of her illness where she was depressed and then manic, we struggled as a family with coping with what that behavior presented to us. She wound up in, actually for 3 years, quite stable, went back to college and was a 4.0 student, very active in student activities as well. But in the summer of 2002, she got off of some of her medication and wound up experiencing a very manic psychotic phase, which for her lasted like 4 or 5 months. When she came off of that finally, back on medication and with the help of a counselor in the family, she went into a deep depression. That was November, December of 2002, and on New Year's Eve 2002, she was in practically a catatonic stage. She was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we had lived for many years, and my wife, Fran, was with her at that time and discovered her in this catatonic stage and got her into a behavioral health care unit in Tulsa, who treated her for 10 days and then, against our wishes, released her on a Friday afternoon without any plan for the weekend. A very aggressive aftercare program was to begin on Monday, January 13th at 3 o'clock. But at 1 o'clock, she was at a friend's apartment and found a hidden .22 caliber rifle. The friend was out for a little while, and she managed to shoot herself through the heart, through her aorta, severed her aorta, and she died instantly at age 26. We grieved her loss and still do profoundly. As our life moves on in some ways, there's continues to be that big hole in our family without Carla.
Yes.
Her name is Carla with a K, by the way.
That's a beautiful name.
Yes, and what we did as a result of that is I wrote the first book, The Tattered Tapestry, within about 6-8 months of her death, because I wanted to capture the story and kind of the raw emotion of the aftermath of that. And that's in that book. We also formed the Carla Smith Foundation, which is Carla, again with a K, carlasmithfoundation.org, which is our website. We formed the foundation to provide what we call Hope for a Balanced Life for family and friends of anyone with mental health problems or who lost a loved one to suicide. And part of that mission, we accomplished part of that mission through support groups. We have one support group for the family and friends of anyone with a mental illness. We have a second separate support group for anyone who lost a loved one to suicide. And particularly in our support group for the family and friends of anyone with mental health problems, and based upon our own personal experience, we identified nine strategies that we think will be helpful to people who are living with someone with a mental illness. We did not have the benefit of these strategies when we were going through it. We didn't even know, frankly, that DBSA existed or any other organizations existed. We were really on our own and kind of struggled with what do you do about this? We could get some information about bipolar disorder online, and we did do that. We researched that, but how do you apply that information to living situations? That was a difficult transition, and we knew that there's a need for that. So
absolutely a need, and Tom, I can echo your sentiments word for word. Actually, as we were living the journey with our Rebecca, we too did not know where to turn. There was limited, if any, information for the families, and certainly limited information for Rebecca. I would love for our listening audience to hear from you the 9 strategies that you have written about so beautifully in your book. Would you mind doing that? And then after hearing the 9 strategies, I'm going to ask you to flesh out a few of them after we hear the 9.
Sure. Thank you, Gail. I'll be happy to. These 9 strategies are not necessarily in the order that I'm going to present them. We believe that all 9 of them taken together gives family and friends the best opportunity to achieve what we call a balanced life, because we think if you're living with someone with a mental illness, your life is out of balance. And the goal is to try to get some balance back into that life, and we think the combination of all these 9 are your best shot at achieving that sense of balance. The first strategy is help our loved one find and continue to take the medication needed for a balanced life. Number 2, urge our loved one to maintain a supportive relationship with a therapist, counselor, or sponsor. Number 3, learn as much as we can about the mental disorder of our loved one. Number 4, assist our loved one in developing a healthy self-esteem, since it is critical for a balanced emotional life. Number 5, accept mental disorder as a fact of life for our loved one, even though this mental disorder does not encompass all of life. Number 6, take care of ourselves by proper exercise, sleep, diet, relationships, and by monitoring our feelings. Number 7, become a supportive network of family and or friends who know about the mental disorder and who commit to acting in the best interest of our loved one as far as we are able. Number 8, identify the early warning signs that precede a more difficult phase of the mental disorder and help our loved one when these signs emerge. And number 9, acknowledge our dependence on a higher power and seek guidance from that higher power in whatever way that is comfortable to us. I would just want to add to the 9 that if in a particular situation a family identifies another strategy that works and is needed in their situation, please adopt that as a strategy also. But I would caution that trying to pick and choose among the 9 and saying, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 of them, probably will not be as effective. What we believe is that all 9 of these used in concert provide us the best path to some sense of peace.
Absolutely. I would reiterate that wholeheartedly. In your preface, Tom, you write, living with these strategies, those that you just outlined for us, will bring balance, hope, and peace in troubled times. We use the word hope a great deal in our work through Rebecca's Foundation and Rebecca's Dream. You have written about hope in your beautiful book, and I would like to know if you would please speak to the issue of hope, what you really mean by that, hope.
I would mention hope in 2 categories. One is hope for the person with the mental disorder. There is hope. Hope means that a future can be better than what it is right now, that sometime down the road, even someone who is in very serious disarray emotionally because of their mental disorder, even those people can find some hope if they follow some of these strategies. Take the medication, find the right medication, get a good doctor, have a counselor. That all of those kinds of efforts on the part of the person with the mental health problems can provide some hope for them. There are many people with bipolar disorder and with other mental illnesses who lead very productive, happy lives in our society. Usually people get in trouble with their mental illness when they do not follow some medication prescription or don't see a counselor on a regular basis and do not have a supportive family and friends. So the hope for the person with the mental health problems is that there is the possibility of a brighter future. For the family and friends, which is the primary focus of our book, there's also hope. And that hope stems from not just dependent on whether their loved one with mental health problems gets better, but they also have the hope that they can manage their own lives, the emotional chaos that is present in their lives. They can manage that emotional life better. The 9 strategies are a path to that kind of hope. So there are possibilities of things getting better. And in the book, there are testimonies of people basically from our own life, and then also from the people who are in our support group who have testified and given examples of how a particular strategy had led them to a sense of hope and balance.
Absolutely. And again, I want to reiterate that all 9 strategies are equally important. As you said, Tom, if we just pick and choose, we're not going to reach the goal that we're looking for. However, due to our time restraints, I am going to ask you about another chapter that strikes me as being absolutely crucial, and that is Chapter 6 on self-care. And what you have written is the strategy: take care of yourselves by proper exercise, sleep, diet, relationships, and by monitoring our feelings. All of the above is crucial, and Tom, would you spend a little bit of time talking about our feelings, the feelings of those living with our loved ones, going through the dreadful ups and downs that they go through? What about our feelings?
Yeah, our feelings as family members and friends are very, can be very, very chaotic. I know I experienced some real frustration, anger at times at her behavior, not understanding that it was due to her illness and not her personal responsibility. So there's a tremendous amount of frustration. The other thing that happens, I think, is that we learn how to communicate with one another in what we might call normal circumstances. And the ways in which we communicate under normal circumstances with other people, we're familiar with how that works. And when we say something, another person says something, and we learn how to communicate. But when you're dealing with someone with a mental disorder, those normal means of communication just don't work. You don't get the kind of response that you would normally get from someone. You get sometimes very bizarre responses. So that leads to a constant exposure to frustration. It requires a lot of special attention to deal with someone with a mental illness, and that can be very time-consuming. It can be intellectually challenging, and just frankly emotionally draining. You get drained emotionally, physically, intellectually. You don't know where to turn. You don't know what to do next. Everything is out of proportion. So in that environment, it's vital for people to do what this strategy says. We get a lot of advice to do proper exercise, sleep, diet, and all of that comes from and that's true for everybody. But
right.
When you're dealing with someone with a mental illness, with the emotional drain that I just tried to describe, those kinds of that kind of advice for exercise, sleep, diet, it becomes even more critical because it can just take it out of you. And then in terms of relationships, what often happens is that our relationships are so focused on the person with the mental illness that we drop other relationships and we shortchange perhaps other kids in the family, other needs that require us. We shortchange them a lot of times just to try to keep up with the person who is with the mental illness. And I added that phrase about monitoring our feelings because one of the things that happens is that we have some negative feelings towards our loved one, but we don't want to express any of that for fear of reaction that we're not anticipating. So we wind up even denying and suppressing some of the negative feelings that we have. And I suggest here that we have to monitor those feelings. We have to be on top of them. We have to know what we are really feeling and express those to someone, both the positive feelings and the negative ones. It takes much more attention to our own self-care when we're dealing with someone with a mental illness than it does if you don't have that situation.
So Tom, are you suggesting that those living, the family, siblings, parents, anyone living with someone who is going through the mental health issue, that we too seek out our own support system, actually group work like you're doing, and also our own therapy?
Absolutely. It was our experience, and many other people who are in similar situations experience also, that it just gets overwhelming. And that sense of being overwhelmed, a good way through that or trying to work with that is to get support from other people. People will testify in our support group all the time that they really didn't know anyone else was feeling this way, that their feelings were so isolated, and because of the stigma attached to mental illness, they're reluctant to talk to anyone about it. So going to a support group with other people who are experiencing similar things can be a tremendous relief in itself. And then in that setting, they also positive things emerge from that. Suggestions, strategies, how different people cope with situations, how they think about situations becomes very supportive for everyone there.
Actually, that is such a benefit for family members, because we too feel isolated and we too feel alone. And I have to say very honestly that I felt and continue to feel a huge sense of rage and anger toward those outside of the mental health community who just don't get it. Looking at our children, I can imagine that your Carla was every bit as magnificent and beautiful and talented and creative as my Rebecca, and who would believe that anything was wrong? And all of the negative responses that we heard, that we were spoiling her, that we should tough love, you've heard it, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being with others who truly appreciate and understand makes such a difference for us as well. In your book, at the end of each chapter, Tom, you have done something quite wonderful. You have questions for group discussion or personal reflection. Did these group discussion and personal reflection statements come out of your group work?
Yeah, most of it was based upon our experience in the group. After writing the strategy and thinking about it and knowing that how I would hope the book would be used would be in support groups and personally as well, that we tested those questions in our support group and got various answers and reworded some of them and dropped some and added some others based upon that. It was kind of like our group here was like a field test for some of those. And the purpose of those questions, both in the group setting and for personal reflection, is to try to ask the reader to take the information that's there and apply it to their own situation. So the key is to see how each chapter fits, each individual circumstance, and that's the intention of them. And they are kind of tried questions. They're just made up. They're based upon the experience of the
with a lot of input. I want to go back to something we had been talking about before. How do you suggest avoiding resentment, the neglect and tension with others in your family, in your social network? I'm particularly thinking of Kevin. He's a twin, and so much attention was focused on Carla, and then there's Kevin. What can you say to our listening audience about siblings?
Sibling Kevin gives wonderful testimony to the relationship of siblings and how difficult it was and the grief related to her suicide. What he did in the first book I mentioned, The Tattered Tapestry, he kept a daily log of Carla's manic episode the fall before she died. And if anyone wants to see how a sibling can attempt to relate to and support his sister, just read. He's got a couple chapters in that book that really is that log. So he's very, very close to her. He has since been married and has our first grandson.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, and he just said the other day at a support group meeting, he mentioned this, that his wife asked him what he wanted for Christmas, and the first thing that came out was, I want my sister back so I could introduce her to my son.
Oh, my God.
So those kinds of things are still very, very, and it's 5.5 years since Carla has died, but that's the way she is still, a part of our life and how much we miss her. But in terms of your question on resentment, the comment that I'd make is that the first thing about resentment and any kind of feeling really is admit it first. Admit the resentment. And once we admit that we are feeling that, then list the reasons for that resentment. What's behind it? Try to identify the reasons behind the feeling. Because all of our feelings actually come from, I believe, a way in which we think. So if we can identify our thinking, what leads to the feelings, that helps expose it and put it out there for us. Then I guess the next step would be to claim that resentment, own it. It isn't like a resentment or an anger that is someone else is doing this to me. I own my own feelings. My feelings are mine, and claiming those feelings, claiming that resentment, claiming that anger is a necessary stage to letting go of it. And then finally, I think that it's more possible to let go of the resentment, let go of the anger, once we have admitted it, listed the reasons, claimed it, then we're at a point to say, I don't really need these negative feelings. I can let go of them. And at least for me, a key to that whole process, which can often take a long, long time,
yes.
but the key to it is that thing I mentioned about owning it. My feelings are mine. Circumstances, other people, other situations don't make me feel in any particular way. It isn't that I choose the feelings, but I own them. And once I admit that, then it's better it's a little easier, I think, to say I don't need to feel that way or think that way any longer. It's a hard process, and it usually takes, as you suggested, Gail, it usually takes either group work or private counseling as well. And I do recommend both group work for the family and friends and private counseling for the family and friends of anyone with a mental health problems.
Yes, it's absolutely crucial. It's a very long, lonely road.
Yes.
Walking, and one cannot do it alone.
That's right.
Speaking of your group work, can you please give us an idea of how you use the book, excuse me, how you do use the book in a group setting? Do you take it chapter by chapter, week after week? How do you lead, or do you lead a group using your book?
Yeah, the format of our groups is we start them off with a reading, a short reading, kind of introducing people to the group and what we're trying to accomplish there. We often have new people, like last Thursday night, for example, we had our support group meeting. We had 18 people and 2 new people. So we do an introductory thing that just takes about a minute or so. Then what we'll do is we'll read the 9 strategies, just as I did earlier. We'll just pass the paper around, and everybody will read one without comment, just to have people become aware of what we're focusing on here. Then what we'll do is we'll do a check-in, so that everyone gets an opportunity to say where they are and what's happened since the last session, since the last meeting, or what's going on in their life right now. And as we go around the table and people report on their current situation, then everyone in the group can respond to that. Sometimes it becomes, if they hit on something that is very common to a lot of people, it'll be a kind of a lengthy sharing going on at that point. And that usually takes, we meet for an hour and a half, and that will normally take an hour or so, just to have people kind of share where they are and to get help from anybody around the table. But we will end up the session with the last 10 minutes or so with a focus on one of the strategies. For example, this month, we're taking them by the month. So this month we were on strategy number 2, which is the one about therapist, counselor, or sponsor. And people will have read, most of them, I think, generally read the chapter beforehand. This is not a study group, or it's not an education thing like that. But what we'll do then is go to the questions that you pointed out at the end of the chapter. At one point, we'll just kind of quickly summarize the theme of that chapter, and then go into those questions. And generally, the questions bring people back to the content of the chapter, as well as people can add their own various responses and that to those various questions. But the questions become kind of the anchor of that education part of our session. We did not want our support group to be an experience of people, frankly, just kind of complaining about how bad it is.
Right.
And we all know how bad it is, but we wanted it to be more positive than that. We have to acknowledge the negative experiences, but at the same time, we wanted to have it be educational and helpful, so that people can see a path to the hope that we had talked about earlier. And I would call our group now, I call it a mature group, in the sense that there are people who come each session who have been coming for a couple of years, and they have worked through a lot of different issues, and so they can share from their experience. And we also have regularly new people. So it's a good group in that there's a mixture of new people who are just, like we had a couple just come in last two meetings ago, who's just, their daughter was just diagnosed bipolar, and they're just in the beginning of what is this all about, and it's very helpful to have people who have lived through some of that share their experience. That's where the hope comes from.
Absolutely. Are you and Fran the leaders, or how do you?
Initially, Fran and I kind of alternated being the facilitator of it, but at this point, we have other people in the group who also do that facilitating. People who have been with the group for some time and are familiar with the strategies, and are some of the more, I would call, veteran members of the group. They volunteer, and we ask people to volunteer to lead the group. Mm-hmm. So they take their turns at doing that.
Do I have your permission, and you can say no, but do I have your permission to give your phone number on this podcast for those who would like to start a group using your book? Would you be willing to help people begin and if they need some of your expertise, are you willing to, and do you have the time actually to help people through this process? And again, you can say no.
Oh, no. I say an emphatic yes, because that is precisely one of the parts of our mission is that we intend to do that. In fact, there is a group in southern Illinois, further south in Marion, Illinois, who is we would do more than just talk to them about the approach in that. I have a little facilitator booklet that we use for training for people.
Wonderful.
We would go to people. If people in Chicago, we can get there quite easily. We would be glad to even come and visit and have a training session with them and talk about not only the format of the meeting and some suggestions on kind of group dynamics, but also how do you market this?
Right.
How do you let people know that that you actually exist? And so yes, the phone. Oh, one other thing along those lines, we just completed a DVD, Carla Smith Foundation DVD, which outlines it runs 14 minutes, which tells our story and invites people to join us in our mission. And we would be more than happy to give our. Let me give you our foundation phone number and our home phone number.
Okay, very good. And would you mind repeating it twice?
Sure. The foundation phone number is 1-888-KSF-HOPE, H-O-P-E. So it's 888-KSF-HOPE. Okay. And our home number is 618-628-3129. That's 618-628-3129. And actually, I would suggest that people would call the home number. We'll answer that at any point.
That's wonderful.
And also, while I'm doing that, you can also get a lot of information about us and our services and that at our website, which is Carla Smith Foundation, Carla with a K, carlasmithfoundation.org.
Carla Smith Foundation with a K.
.org, yeah.
Wonderful. You're doing incredible work. And there isn't enough. There just isn't enough that we can all do. It's overwhelming, actually.
That's right. Absolutely.
I have a question that might be very unfair, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have a favorite section in your book, A Balanced Life? Was there one or perhaps two sections or chapters in particular that you and your family found most helpful to write?
Yeah. Let me mention two of them, Gail. And number one is the first one. Help our loved one find and continue to take the medication needed for a balanced life. It is really pivotal that people get the proper medication, and as you may or may not know, it's not always easy to find that.
I do know.
Okay, the combination of getting a medication that works and stays effective is so pivotal in this whole experience of someone with a mental illness that the family and friends' role in that is that they need to know what the medication is, the effects it has, the side effects, the doctor who prescribes it, access to that doctor, particularly if for some reason the medication is no longer effective, the person quits taking the meds, which happens all too frequently, or the side effects become unmanageable, then it's the family and friends who often need to intervene and guide the person back to the medication needed. So I want to emphasize the medication piece to it. In our support group, that topic comes up over and over again. What's tied in with that is finding a doctor who prescribes and who's really is interested in the person. We hear a lot of times that the psychiatrists and doctors who prescribe meds just spend a few minutes with the patient and just gives them their meds and off they go.
Right.
Which is why they also need a counselor. But that'd be the one thing I want to comment on. The other one I want to comment on, and I want to do this because it's not too prevalent, and we're trying to promote it. And that is strategy number 7. Become a supportive network of family and friends who know about the mental disorder and who commit to acting in the best interest of our loved one as far as we are able. As we said earlier, the family can just become drained physically, emotionally, spiritually, drained in dealing with someone with a mental disorder. What we propose in this strategy is to expanding the network of people who know about and are closely related to the person with the mental illness so that they can become almost family. Expand the family network to include other people who are supportive. I think that's so important because that can take some of the pressure off of the family in relating to the person with the mental illness. So that's really important. And expanding that network, it's so hard for people to do that because the stigma is there. If like my wife, for example, had cancer last year, she's fortunately recovering from that. But when people found out that she had cancer, and we were not reluctant to let people know that, there was all kinds of support. Right. People just were very emotionally supportive. But if you share with someone your daughter has bipolar disorder, they're not going to be there to support as much.
That's right.
A lot of times they shy away. It's kind of like I don't know what to do with that. And so it's much harder to get a supportive network of people. But what we promote in that 7th strategy is some techniques to invite people in to that inner circle of support, and that we think is a very critical step in coping with the mental illness of a loved one.
Absolutely, and I think what we have to remember also, Tom, is that there were years when we never said the word cancer. The big C, it was always a secret, and there was such a stigma attached to that, and look how far we've come in regard to that horrible disease. And my hope, and yours as well, I know, is that there will come a day when we can talk about mental illness with the same compassion, with the same understanding, and with the same hopefulness.
Oh, absolutely. I use that example a lot, Gail. I would like to take it one step further, a little more specific even, that I'd love to see a day when, the Susan Komen Race for the Cure, which is very known, raised a lot of money for one thing, for research, but it also is an awareness event. I'd sure like to see a similar kind of event, annual event for mental illness.
Well, we're going to work on that because that's where we want to go too.
Yeah, I do too, and I think to make that happen, groups like Rebecca's Dream, DBSA, ourselves, and other foundations and groups around the country, and NAMI too. I'd like to get NAMI involved.
Yes.
We need one voice. We need one united voice on this to make that kind of impact on our society happen. I think at this point there's a lot of us who are doing kind of individual things. And I think we're making a little impact in our little area here, but and I'm sure you are there too.
Yes, but it's not enough.
Not enough. There's a group in Milwaukee. There's a group out in Montana. There's there are some around the country. There are smaller groups making an effort, but we need a spark to pull that all together and have a truly national campaign.
Well, in reading about you at the end of your book, page 147 about the author, it says, you adopted the motto in 1966, quote, bash on regardless, unquote. Yeah. I believe, Tom, that as long as you continue to bash on, we continue to bash on, the DBSA and all of the other groups in the country continue to bash on, we are going to fulfill the hope and the dream that you and I have been expressing during these past few minutes. I want to thank you tremendously for taking your time to speak to us for the Rebecca's Dream Family Center podcast and for DBSA. Your work is exceptional. Carla was exceptional. Your family is exceptional. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for speaking with me today. Is there something you would like to say to wrap us up?
Well, just to thank you, Gail, for the opportunity of sharing our story and to take another step in getting our collaborative mission out there a little better. So I want to thank you, DBSA, for all the work that you and they do for the sake of the people with mental illness and, in our particular experience, for the family and friends. I think there needs to be, I would like to see an even stronger emphasis on the needs and that of family and friends of someone with mental illness, whether we'd have our own separate organization or whatever. But we are, the people who are like us have experiences that need attention, and whatever we can do to highlight that and to help make that happen, I think would be a service to our society, actually.
Absolutely. And we will stay in touch, and we will make it happen. We will bash on together.
You bet. Let's do it.
Take care, and thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you,
It's
Gail.
a pleasure talking to you.
And you too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.